We've got the football in focus from the Ohio State and over at the Tee Up Indoors on Battleground. Got Bryant Roche with us. Also got Kara Donner for school board. Here's Kara. I was no saw her today. Talked to Kara. School board District 5 getting ready to go for the election on Tuesday. Early voting again on Friday and Saturday. 2 more days early voting. Then the election day on Tuesday. Kara Donner going to work hard for school board District 5. A passion for community and a plan for success. She's done a lot of work. Remember her and keep in mind her website, which I think is going to be karadonor.com. Check out our website. We'll have more about it on the website for us. We got on the website tonight at Greensboro Sports Radio. Later tomorrow on YouTube, we got Bryant Roche with us, and had those Grimsley guys in. They were on the ball. They were doing good tonight. Good job of those guys. And they got a big game tomorrow night. What about that big Grimsley and Northern Guilford game tomorrow night? You'll be there checking that one out.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
Championship game, yes sir.
Yes indeed, over at Jameson. Yeah.
What do you expect to see tomorrow night in that game?
Well, you know what? I think a lot of people are viewing Northern as the underdog here. Grimsley, the incumbent, they've won this conference the last 5 years, and I think, from that perspective, I think Grimsley is the favorite for Northern. I think I don't know if good old Westberg has a couple balls up his sleeve, couple tricks in there, but I think for Northern, for them, they have to play lights out tomorrow and maybe even hope that Grimsley makes an uncharacteristic mistake or two.
I think it's going to be tough for Northern to get flashy with that passing game against that tough Grimsley defense. The running game, you may be able to establish that, but it's still going to be, those yards are going to be hard to come by, as they say.
I think for them, you talked to big Andre Hill, that big defensive tackle in there. He'll be going up against big old Bagley and I know your guy on the show, good old Twistin Sweeney.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll be a fun matchup to see in the trenches. And I think for Northern, they got to rely on those hogs. I think they got to go up to that up-tempo, no-huddle stuff they're going against Northwest. I think they do. I think you got to roll with that. I think you got to hope to make Grimsley tired. That's your best chance.
If you can get Grimsley in that sequence, you're good, but you got to make sure it's working, because otherwise, if you can't get that to go, you got to slow it way down.
I think, in my opinion, I think Northern, in my mind, I think you got to try the up-tempo.
Yeah, start out trying it, yeah.
I honestly think that Grimsley's, I know what you're referring to, trying to limit possession, slow down the game, but I think, my honest opinion is I think Northern, for them to have a chance, I think they got to run that up-tempo and hope that those big boys up front can make some holes.
And you got to run, like Northern, you got to run fresh. We got to have fresh legs to keep us moving fast.
They do have a couple backs at their disposal, so I think, they can run it between Akers and Hall. I think they can divvy up those carries. So, not that I'm Westberg, but I think what I would tell them, I think you try to create that tempo, not let Grimsley dictate tomorrow night.
And you think about it, let's about this day. I keep thinking about these teams, Grimsley and Page and Northern and Southeast and Western. All these guys are the same, basically same guys. They're like 16, 17, 18 years old for the most part. We're all the same age. It's just how we get together and be on the same level playing-wise. Grimsley's been playing so well. Northern's got to say, hey, they're just like us always. This guy knows this guy. Let's go out and play like this. You got to be able to compete against these guys. You got to have it. You got to compete.
I think Northern, the boys from Northern, it's kind of interesting. They had such a strong start to their program. I know you're familiar with Johnny Roscoe, the stadium named after Mr. Roscoe, but I think for them, the return to relevance is one of the biggest stories of this football season. Mm-hmm. They went 4-6 in each of the last two, now returning to that level of prominence. The last time that Northern was off to this kind of start, they played Grimsley in the fall 2021 season. They lost to Grimsley in a similar scenario, if you remember, Mr.
Yeah, that was going back to the days of the quarterback over there, and they had the tight end, Vance Boyard, had the quarterback. What was that guy's name again? I got to get that guy's name back on my head. But, man, they were tough that year. And they took them down the field that game, too. They were taking down the field going. I can still see them going left, right down the field that game. And going crazy that game. Yeah, they were very competitive that game.
And so we'll see what happens. Will history repeat itself? But that was the last time in Northern. They ended up finishing 9-2 that season. The two losses the one to Grimsley and then the one in the playoffs. So, if you're Northern, you kind of hope that it ends differently. But that's probably the most recent example of history we have to compare it to.
That's a good comparison too. Very good. So they were 9-0 going to that game against Grimsley that year. Similar
And they lost it,
situation.
too.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a good thing to bring up. I can't remember what that quarterback's name was though. That quarterback for them that year, because they had Boyard at tight end, and the quarterback. We got to get his name in before we leave. Anyway, going back to other games. What about the Dudley Eastern Guilford game? That's a big one too. I think Caleb Creech of Eastern has got to get running that ball for them. If he can establish some kind of running game somehow against Dudley, I think Eastern can compete for a while in that game.
Well, we'll see what happens. I'll say this. Dudley has one of the best defensive lines that I've seen. They've got a group of, I did the math earlier today, and they're averaging over 21 TFLs this season
Dudley.
per game. 21.
That's a lot.
21 TFLs. Now think about that.
I've been writing those stats up on my website all year long, those TFLs and those sacks and stuff. 21 TFLs is a bunch.
That's per game, folks.
Yeah, that's one game.
That's not their season total.
Right.
That's 21.6 TFLs per game. And then in terms of getting to the quarterback, I have it right here. They're averaging 7.6 sacks per game.
That's a lot of sacks.
If you're Eastern Guilford, if you want any prayer in this football game, I think number one, if you can't run the ball effectively, I think they're going to try to go to that quick game. They've got Stephen Murray on that edge. I think if you have any prayer of winning this game, you got to get Stephen Murray involved, and you got to make life easier for that quarterback, because that pressure will come. And I think their best shot is going quick game, trying to alleviate the pressure, maybe throw in some screens and draws, and I don't think they're going to beat Dudley man for man. I think you got to play a style that alleviates the pressure and keeps them on their toes, because I don't think it's going to be a thing where they can just beat them man for man.
You got to get your playmakers involved, and those playmakers like Murray, and also a guy like DJ Parker, who came over to Eastern from Dudley, get him involved.
Yeah, that's true. There is a connection there, a transfer connection there, and Dudley doesn't usually lose transfers; they usually get them. But DJ Parker was a pretty good player for them prior to leaving.
So you're suggesting, for the most part, your game plan: Northern run that fast-paced offense, Eastern Guilford get the fast-paced offense going too.
I think in a way a little different. They run some different stuff. I mean, Eastern doesn't have the same playbook per se,
right.
but I think, but I do think Eastern, not necessarily playing up tempo from a, no huddle, go up to the line standpoint, but I do think they got to run some screens, run some draws, quick game, because that pressure is going to be an issue. And I think their best shot is alleviating the pressure, and then from there, if they can get Dudley off balance, maybe try to run some of that other stuff when it opens up. But I think to start with, I think you got to alleviate that pressure and find ways to make that pass rush a non-factor the best you can, which is a very tall task.
And all being said and done, I would think you still heavily favor Grimsley to knock off Northern, heavily favor Dudley to knock off Eastern. Heavily favored.
I think so. I think I would probably say that I think Dudley, maybe if there was a point spread per se, I'd probably give Dudley more points than I would Grimsley against Northern.
That might be a closer game.
But I do envision it's hard to pick against kind of the strongholds in our area these last several years.
Looks like it's going to be probably 3 or 4 touchdown difference in a couple of those games, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns possibly, if the team gets on a roll. There's some crazy things and stranger things have happened. Yeah, and last week, we came on here and talked about this week. Let's go back to last week. Let's go back to last week and kind of backtrack USA. Remember TV, radio, music show Backtrack USA? Let's go backtrack. Talk about the Grimsley Page game. What did you see in that game last week?
I think
what went right? What went right for Page? What went right
for
Grimsley and Page both? Anything for Page. Most important, what went right for Grimsley?
I'll start with Grimsley since they won the game. The things that went right for them: Mitchell Summers, and more Mitchell Summers. And I think for them, they established the run. That was a big thing for them. Defensively, they took away the pass game for Page, and from there, early in the game they had a couple plays, big plays from Hudson Cooper, which was nice to see since he really hadn't had a big game since that Roseville game, but he did get hurt.
Got tweaked up a little bit, yeah.
On a play where he was actually Brandon was throwing to him in the end zone, couple defenders in the area, and he came down and didn't return to the game. So that's something to look at. Coach Brown did say that he basically said the status was uncertain. Now that was
day decision.
That was just coming off the field, so I think he
Right.
was maybe in a situation of not speculating. I think for Page, the bright sides were this: you had Christian Brown at running back for Jesse Poole, who did not play in the game. And I actually liked what I saw from Christian Brown. He's a nice burly back. He's a defensive end that also had a strip that he grabbed himself and took for the only touchdown that Page had. So I think the bright sides for Page were Christian Brown, and I think maybe the question marks were kind of the ones we had beforehand, the pass game, and I think from that standpoint, Williamson being out, it made them a little bit more one-dimensional. Williamson can run the ball a little bit more than Henson, who's more of a pocket passer, even though he did some rollout plays. But in terms of actual scrambling and running beyond the line of scrimmage, I think Williamson maybe gave them a little bit more dimension that was missing against Grimsley.
As you gave us that, I thought about this. I think about this right now. Look at Page against Grimsley, how tough it was, but look at Page against Northern and how close that game. That might tell you a lot about how it's going to be with Northern and Grimsley tomorrow night, because Page at Northern played a very good, they kept that game close pretty much the entire night. They give up 18 points in the second half to lose that game. So you think about Page against Northern, very competitive, but against Grimsley, not very competitive.
I did notice that, yeah.
And that Christian Brown dude came in that game for Page against Northern. Boy, number 9, man, he was tearing up some yards out there.
And Northwest took it to Page, and Grimsley took it to Northwest.
I've been thinking the same thing.
So the common opponents, if that's your rule of measuring, it does not favor Northern in this situation here. In addition, Northern and Southeast, although it was a bad weather game, that was also a 6-0 nail biter compared to Grimsley taking it to him pretty handily there.
If I'm Northern, I might say against Page, we were kind of looking ahead to some other games. We were kind of underestimating Page, and we kind of took them for granted. We should have taken them more seriously. As Northern, we should have taken Page a little bit more serious. That game could have been could have been a better game for us that night, because Jackson Kemp did not get going. It was the running game in the second half that tore the yards up for Northern against Page.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the message. If you are Northern and you're kind of looking for a reason to have hope, I think the mindset is, well, we beat Northwest the week before. It was a big rivalry game. We may have had kind of, like you said, sort of a hangover game against Page. Kind of took them lightly a little bit, and kind of looking ahead as well. I think against Western we saw a little bit more of, what we may have been looking for. And so I think for Northern, you're kind of trying to use that as a momentum. Jackson Kemp, a season high 310 passing yards, very efficient as I've seen him all season. So the passing game was spot on. You also had your running game. So I think they come into Grimsley as balanced as they've shown all season. And so I think Western, in a way, might have been a nice tune-up for them, a momentum boost. And for them, they can't look back.
And we can go back to the Western Guilford situation, because Northern beat Western, 49-14? Like, that was the score probably. And then Western Guilford struggled against Page. All these games, this guy did this did that. And the guy from Northern, the quarterback's first name was Jack. I gave you his last name for it. The guy from Northern that year when they had that 9-0 team going to Grimsley, his first name was Jack. But I'm going to get the last name that's in here somewhere.
It's a memory bank somewhere.
It's going to come to me. But some other games tomorrow. I think this Page Southeast Guilford game has a lot on the line there.
I really like that game, just in terms of games that I think this coming week will be competitive / interesting. I really have that one as one of the games in terms of that category. The ones I'm looking for, Page really, I think these teams, their records aren't quite the same, but I think the difference is Page had to play Tabor and Reedsville, Southeast did not. So you have that 2-game swing. Really, I think they're about even, being honest with you. So I think that'll be a good football game.
And where's that game being played at Western or at Page? I guess probably Western because Page was home
It's
last
at Page.
week.
It's at
It's
Page.
at Page. So Page is home back-to-back weeks then.
Yes.
That's pretty
Yep,
good.
that'd
Pretty
be
good way to
correct.
close the season.
Yep, it will be at home.
And
Yeah.
that flag football starts Saturday too. By the way, don't forget
That's
the flag
true.
football coming up
That's true,
Saturday. They
yeah.
got the games, and they're gonna have a bunch of games at Page.
At that turf field, yeah, that turf field.
I guess
don't
that's
hurt.
why they put those games at Page.
They can play a bunch of games
You can
out
play
there.
like
yeah.
half field games if you wanted to, almost a half field, because the field is gonna be smaller, isn't it, for the flag football?
It's it's basically 50 yards and end zones, I guess. So,
Can you play 2 games at once? Too crowded?
That's interesting. Maybe they could. I have to see
Yeah.
how they
'Cause
draw that up.
They
But
used to do
maybe
that
so.
sometimes on 7-on-7s at the college fields. They put the 2 teams up.
I have to check it. Yeah, I did hear it was 50 by 30. However, those measurements worked out.
Interesting.
maybe-
What about Western Guilford Rags? That's a big game too, because Western Guilford wants to go 5-5, finish half for the first time in a long time, and Rags just they want to get that win we've been looking for. They got one last week at Southwest, I guess. Want to have back-to-back wins to close out the year.
Yeah, Western, it's kind of crazy, but they were 4-1 to start with, and so they were searching for that 5-win mark. They've been searching for it for a while now, and you don't want to give up hope. But I will say that Ragsdale, I think they do have a shot to win this one against Ragsdale this week. Ragsdale had struggled for a while. They did beat their rival Southwest, who I hate to say it, but it almost felt like Southwest kind of, the way this season has turned, they've just had trouble against everybody, and Ragsdale took it to them on last week.
But I tell you what, help is on the way. So the middle school game yesterday, Southwest defeated Ragsdale. Yesterday, Jamestown beat them 27-0. They're unbeaten, so help is on the way. Here's the thing about Ragsdale. I got to throw this in here before I forget to bring this up. All the things I've seen the past week that got my attention, this got my attention as much as anything. Maybe not as much as it. Ragsdale last night, I come out of the middle school game. It's gotten dark outside. They've got the field lights on. They play on the football field at Ragsdale High School, the middle school. Go up toward the car lot, to the parking lot, get my car. Ragsdale's still practicing. Football's still going on. They're still practicing. But had never seen this before to my knowledge. They're practicing in the daggone dark. It's dark. It's pitch black. They're still going full steam in the dark. That's amazing.
Maybe it's that Johnny Unitas to Raymond Berry,
gosh.
throwing balls in the dark routine.
Dark in the park or something, or bark in the park, dark in the park. I tell you what, that was, I couldn't believe it. I said, they're up there practicing in the dark. How do you do that? I mean, what can you, line them up? What you
Maybe give Stevenson a call. I don't know.
Yeah, they say you should be able to do this in your sleep. Do it in the dark. Same
That's the
thing.
next closest thing. Right?
Man, I tell you, that's interesting. That really got my attention last night because I'm going up there. I looked at there's bodies out. They're still practicing on that field. Amazing. Well, Northeast Rams on the road to the playoffs, are they? The Rams of Northeast?
They are hanging on the edge, folks. They are hanging on the edge, and I really think that could be an interesting matchup they have, but they're kind of on that borderline right now. So we'll see what happens there. They're kind
Who
of
do they have tomorrow night?
They're on that borderline.
They've already played
They
Smith. They played Rockingham County. They played Southern Guilford. They played Adkins. Who they've got tomorrow? They just played Dudley, I guess, a week or so back, Northeast Guilford. So the Rams are getting ready to close it out. I think they're playing a winnable game tomorrow night. I'm not mistaken, because looked at that schedule. I think they're finished up possibly 6-4 with that win tomorrow night. Could be a big game for Northeast Guilford Rams. Is Bryant's going to get that for us?
Yeah, hold on. They're looking to see their playoff hunt. I do know they're 5-4, and they do indeed play Ben L. Smith this week.
Oh, they do play Smith tomorrow night. Interesting. They got to get They should win that game. There's no doubt about it.
I think you look for them to be favored. They're third right now in the conference. So usually third gets you in. And so I would say, based on how things look, I'd have to check the whole 3A. But I do believe third place and solo third right now, they should be favored against Smith. I think they're in, based on kind of how things usually work. I think if they're right now, they're 4-2 in the league. Their only losses have come to the best two in terms of Dudley and Eastern. So I think right now that projection if you're in third place, usually that means you're in.
Think
I
about
like
them.
the
They've
change.
been winning the games they should win. That's the thing. They took care of most of their business. Yeah. So where will you be tomorrow night? What's your game of choice?
So we'll be at Grimsley and Northern Guilford, the only matchup of undefeated teams on our area docket, and we'll see what happens. But two undefeated teams in both overall and in Metro 4A play.
You were right about that game a couple years back when they played at Northern, and Jack was the quarterback, and Vance Boyer was the tight end, and Northern gave Grimsley all they wanted. I can still see that ball going left, right down the field. Northern's going down the field. They were giving Grimsley all they wanted that night. And Ryan Stevens, I think, was quarterback in Grimsley back in that day. Stevens, who went on to play at Summit, East Carolina. Big game there, big game. Eastern Guilford Dudley will be at Dudley tomorrow night to cover them with Eastern Guilford. Dimitri Morris will be with you over at Grimsley.
Okay.
James Stan Demetrius will be there tomorrow night. So we got both games covered on Greensboro Sports Radio. And don't forget Kara with a C, Kara Donor, getting ready to go for school board. Again, that's District 5 on Tuesday, and also tomorrow and Saturday. Tomorrow the polls will close at, I think, 7 p.m. on Saturday. Going to close at 3 p.m. early. Check out Kara. Be sure to vote for her in District 5 for school board. She's done a great job. Came in from up in Virginia. Is settled in here and doing very well. Keep her in mind. Keep Bryant Roche in mind. Again, give them your Twitter information.
So my Twitter account is BROCHE Sports, and you can find me there. And as always, Mr. Durham, I appreciate you giving me this platform here at Teed Up Indoors.
Teed Up Indoors with Football in Focus, and we'll keep it rolling again next week. May have a special show next week because there's no games next week. I may have a special show. I got something in mind if I can pull this off. Got a special show lined up for next week if I can make it. We have gone maybe 4 for 4 with players. We've had a lot of players coming in on a steady basis the past few weeks. We did very well with, I guess we had, Northern Guilford, we had Eastern Guilford, we had Page, we had Grimsley. We've had a pretty good steady flow lately. Those Grimsley guys, I wouldn't want to meet those guys on the side of the road if I got, those guys were big. Those Grimsley guys were big tonight. Cooper was the smallest guy, and he's not that small, but boy, you talk about DJ Howardson, talk about Andre Hill, and that other guy, Melton guy, that just came in, the sophomore. Man, by the time that guy graduates, that guy's going to look like, remember Carl Eller from the old Purple People Eaters back in the day for Vikings? Reminds me of Carl Eller back then. Don Moore, thank you so much for the good work you do. We thank everyone that tunes in and follows the show on YouTube coming up later and on Greensboro Sports Radio all the time. Tomorrow night we got Grimsley and Northern Guilford on Greensboro Sports Radio 2 with Dimitri Morrison. We have got Eastern Guilford and Dudley on Greensboro Sports Radio with Randy Norris, our coach, calling the call with us tomorrow night. Right, we'll see you next week.
All right, Mr. Durham, thank you as always.
Have a good week, everyone.